I just received it. It's called Statistical Process Control, Implementing the Fundamentals for Deming's Philosophy on TQM. Now, this is what a business was given in order to change their system to a total quality management. And since total quality management and Dr. Deming's concepts are going to be used in the school, I thought that it was interesting that we would apply total quality management to things like integrity and honesty, right? Or whatever we're going to measure, decision-making skills, etc. Okay, first of all, they say quality falls in different categories, right? I mean, you can have a Rolls Royce or you can have Skippy peanut butter, but you could have quality in both. So the key is, how do you define quality? And these are definitions. Quality is conformance to requirements, conformance to outcomes. So quality will mean that you must meet learning outcomes in order to graduate. Quality is absence of defects. There will be no defects in this product. Remember, the child is now the product, the parent is the supplier, and the teacher will be the mass production assembly line to be sure that we have the quality product. TQM. Quality is fitness for use. So we have to be sure that this quality product is able to go out and do their job in the workforce that was guaranteed for them, so that they could be focused to where they will fit in the new world society. The problem, they say, with saying and talking about quality is that when you start to use words to define quality, then you need more words. For instance, what is conformance? What is a defect? What is fitness? What is condition? Who says so? What are those conditions? How are they measured? How many are there going to be measured? So when you talk about quality, the only way to explain it is to bring in more words. So what they say is, now what we're going to do is, let's use numbers to explain quality instead of words. So now we're going to put a number on it, and the standard or the end product then can be compared to where the children would be in the system. So if we say that the number 5 is where we want them to be, and that is the main standard for decision-making or ethical judgment, then when we measure it and they get a 2, then we know, gee, they didn't meet the outcome. We have to move the child from number 2 to number 5. So it's much easier to work in numbers, because when you say, well, they didn't meet ethical judgment, no one really understands. So let's put a number on it. And this is what I'm going to show you of what they've done. Now, remember what I said about all the variables in the system? I'm going to quote from Nashuba Corporation from Japan, and this is a quote. When I speak of statistical thinking, I refer to the appreciation, not just knowledge, of the effects of variation. And I refer to direct actions relating to variation. In particular, we have to characterize it, we have to identify it, we have to identify the source, we have to estimate its amount, we have to control it, and then we have to reduce it. So the whole idea is that we have to eliminate the defects by controlling it. First, we're going to look at it and characterize it, define it, estimate it, control it, and then reduce it. That's total quality management. So in effect, we have this cycle, and it's a closed-loop cycle. First, we're going to design it, we're going to produce it, we're going to sell it, and we're going to improve it. So we have the cycle here. We're going to assess, we're going to teach, we're going to process, evaluate, and then recycle again to be sure that everyone, it is a closed loop surface that everyone must come. And they say the concept of prevention, to make sure that everyone meets that process or the end product, you have to measure the process while making the product. You have to control the process. You must control the process, or you're not going to meet the outcome. You have to predict the outcome and then continue to study the process for ways to improvement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to put a number on quality. So this came directly out of the United States Department of Education computer banks, and this is how I found all of my material. All of my materials are directly from either Pennsylvania or U.S. Department of Education materials. And this was the test that they gave my son that I filed the federal complaint. It was called the Educational Quality Assessment, or EQA. Remember the whole child theory? Pennsylvania was a pilot to test and experiment all children with the whole child theory. And it was called the Pennsylvania EQA. And what they were going to test were things like ethical values, self-esteem, and we had the quality goals, but the key was that they were going to measure them to a minimum positive attitude. So the whole idea was to measure and put a number on quality. Getting inside the EQA inventory was the evaluation of the test. Now, here's the paradigm that I want you to understand. What they told parents for citizenship was that they wanted quality of education should help every child acquire the habits and attitudes associated with responsible citizenship. And you parents said, yes, that's what we want. We want quality citizenship. We want our kids to be patriotic. We want them to go out and vote. We want them to learn about our founding fathers because that's your paradigm. That's your paradigm. Not the state's. It's doublespeak. They're lying to you. And I can prove it because I have the knowledge, and knowledge is power. And the only antidote to power is rival power. And we have that with each and every one of us because one person can make that difference. Everything was geared toward group goals, group efforts. It was geared toward collectivism. So the whole idea is that we were going to measure group actions, group goals, and group efforts. But the key to the whole EQA was that they were monitoring the objectives for the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which is the national test. So here's Pennsylvania validating national objectives in our state test on group efforts. And if that wasn't enough, they said specifically that the national objectives were used to provide the frame of reference, and that knowing structure of government and understanding problems of international relations were not considered in developing the scales. So you have to ask yourself the question, well, gee, what was? If we aren't going to be measuring things that we think citizenship are in America. They were measuring the predispositions of individuals in trying to determine or predict outcomes. The whole idea was to predict what a child would do in a hypothetical situation. So a child was put into a hypothetical situation, and by reward and punishment, B.F. Skinner, they were asked to respond. To assess citizenship, a behavior reference model incorporating elements related to the psychological notion of threshold is used. In reference to citizenship, threshold refers to that set of conditions necessary to bring about the desired outcome. So, by varying the situation, introducing conditions of reward and punishment, B.F. Skinner, we are able to determine the cutoff levels at which the student will display positive behavior. They were all predefined. I read this when I pulled it off the computer, and I thought, do-do-do-do-do-do-do. I'm done in. This isn't. I showed it to my husband. I said, would you read this? And you have to ask yourself the question. This is a state assessment, mind you. Why does the state want to know why my son Garrett is in his threshold levels of compliance by reward and punishment? Why does the state collecting the attitudes and values of children? What are they doing with the data? What are they doing with it? Hypothetical situation that the child must role play. He puts himself into an antisocial situation, and they put conditions, stimulus responses, of how the child will respond. There is a secret club at school called the Midnight Artists. They go out late at night and paint funny sayings and pictures on buildings. A student is asked to join the club. In this situation, I would join the club when I knew. Number one, my best friend asked me to join. This is scored according to subscale number 3, willingness to honor self-made commitments to individuals or groups. What is the child's commitment to his best friend? I would go out and vandalize if my best friend would. The state desired response is yes. You got 1 point for yes, and you got 0 for no. The scoring is on the next page. I would join the club when number 2, most of the popular students were in the club. You got 1 point for yes, you got 0 for no. The third one was, I would join the club when I knew my parents would ground me if they found out I joined. The state desired response was no. You got 1 point for no and 0 for yes. And you'd think, well, gee, why would they want them to do what their parents wanted? That's not what the state was looking for. Go back to what they were looking for. By reward and punishment, will the child comply? So if punishment is incurred, would the child obey? The whole idea is a temperature-taking device to see where the child is in their attitudes and values by reward and punishment. It didn't matter if parent was there, principal, state, policeman. Would the child obey with an authoritarian figure saying, don't do this or we'll come and get you, we'll ground you. So the whole idea is conformity. Now, I have tons of papers on the testing. In self-esteem, they were testing locus of control. Were you an individual? Did you go along with the group? For flexibility and adaptability to change, they were changing at what point the change would come without protest. Understand that by gathering thresholds, locus of control, adapting to change, how you relate to others in your environment, that they now have a psychological profile of not only of the child, but of the entire community. And what did they do with the information? They collected it on something called Resources for Improvement, in which they validated national curriculum by the National Institute of Education to improve in that goal. Remember, in citizenship, it was to improve thresholds to meet their number at the end for quality, and that they would target your population according to where you lived as to which curriculum would do its job. Validated by the United States Department of Education Joint Dissemination Review Panel that Charlotte was talking about, that Charlotte has been talking about for well over 15 years. The National Diffusion Network was the transmission belt of validated curriculum to be sure that your child changed their threshold levels to meet the minimum state attitude of the government. And I do also have a list of some. For instance, here's the new Model Me in Ohio, and you think, well, gee, here's one from Ohio, one from New Jersey, Law on a Changing Society from Texas, Florida, New York. How can you validate Law on a Changing Society from Dallas, Texas under the Pennsylvania EQA unless the Pennsylvania EQA had the national validating system or everyone was using the national educational goals or the national objectives? All of the above. Pennsylvania did validate the national objectives, and we did validate the national curriculum. So where is this all going to? Remember the one concept that we said in the very beginning from Georgia? Cradle to grave, tomb to womb, womb to tomb, sorry, womb to tomb. One of the first districts that were used was the Farrell Area School District that was used as the model for community service systems, where the federal government, the local government, and the county government, state would all come together in collaboratives and filter money into a district for community services. They called it the Prescription for America. This is your health care link. The key is that the national health care will merge with anyone not meeting outcomes in the community. The Farrell District is near to Erie, Pennsylvania. They redefined family, any person or persons who have a common bond of shared responsibility for each other and or a child or children in their care. Now, if that's not what you think your family should be, I would suggest that you